Hey there, tech enthusiasts. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we're diving into the world of Kubernetes by learning how to install Minikube on Ubuntu 22.04. Whether you're a beginner or a seasoned developer, Minikube is an excellent tool for setting up a local Kubernetes cluster for development and testing purposes. Before we begin, make sure you have Ubuntu 22.04 installed on your system and a stable internet connection. Let's jump right into it. Update your package list to ensure you have the latest version of all software by running these commands. Check if Docker is installed by running this command. If it says active, then Docker is installed. If it is not installed on your system, check the video in the description on how to install Docker on Ubuntu 22.04. Next, download and install Minikube binary by running these next two commands. Verify the Minikube version you have just installed by running this command. Let us now install kubectl tool. Kubectl is a command line interface tool used to interact with Kubernetes clusters. It serves as the primary means of managing Kubernetes clusters, enabling users to deploy and manage applications, inspect and manage cluster resources, view logs, and perform various administrative tasks. Next, set the executable permission on it and then move it. Check the version installed by running this command. Now that Minikube is installed, start a Kubernetes cluster using the following command. Minikube will start a local Kubernetes cluster using Docker as the underlying container runtime, allowing you to interact with and develop Kubernetes applications on your local machine. I'm running as root. If you are running as root, create a new user with sudo privileges. Run this command to create a new user. Add your own username. Myself, I will use Zach. Then create a password for your new user. Just press enter to continue. If you are not using the root account, skip this whole process of creating a new user. Run this command to add the new user to the sudo group. You can now switch to the new user. Test the sudo privileges by running this command. If it runs, it means the user has sudo privileges. Add your local user to Docker group so that your local user run Docker commands without sudo. Run this command to start the Minikube cluster. The command will initiate the startup process for a local Kubernetes cluster using Minikube, with Docker being employed as the container runtime for managing the cluster's containers. Verify the status of your cluster by running this command. Use kubectl to interact with your Minikube Kubernetes cluster. For example, you can check the nodes in your cluster by running these commands. Let us now try to deploy a sample Nginx deployment. Run following commands. This command will create a deployment named Nginx Web in your Kubernetes cluster, with each pod in the deployment running a container based on the Nginx image. The second command will create a node port service in your Kubernetes cluster, exposing the pods of the Nginx Web deployment on port 80. This makes the Nginx Web server accessible from outside the cluster through any node's IP address on the specified port. When you run this command, Kubernetes will list all deployments, pods, and services currently running in the cluster, along with their respective details such as name, status, age, and other metadata. This command is helpful for quickly checking the status and details of important resources in your Kubernetes cluster during development, troubleshooting, or monitoring activities. When you run this command, Minikube will display a list of all available add-ons along with their status, indicating whether they are currently enabled or disabled in the Minikube cluster. This command is useful for quickly checking which add-ons are available and their current status, allowing users to enable or disable them as needed to customize their Minikube environment. For example, let us enable the add-on dashboard by running this command. This other command is used to enable the Ingress add-on in a Minikube Kubernetes cluster. When you run Minikube add-ons enable Ingress, Minikube will enable the Ingress controller add-on in the cluster. The Ingress controller is responsible for managing access to services within the Kubernetes cluster from outside the cluster, typically via HTTP and HTTPS routes. It allows for routing external traffic to different services based on host names, paths, or other criteria defined in Ingress resources. Enabling the Ingress controller add-on is useful when you want to expose your services to external users or applications and manage routing and load balancing for incoming traffic in a Kubernetes cluster running on Minikube. To start the Kubernetes dashboard you just enabled, run this command. It will automatically launch the dashboard in the web browser, but I'm connected via SSH, so it will not launch on my screen. To stop and start the Minikube cluster, you can run these commands. To delete the Minikube cluster, run the following command. And that's a wrap, folks. You've successfully installed Minikube on Ubuntu 22.04. Remember, Minikube provides a simple and convenient way to get started with Kubernetes locally, allowing you to experiment and develop your applications with ease. If you found this guide helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more tutorials like this. Thanks for watching, and happy coding!